Hi friends, everybody has Candida. It's basically a yeast, kind of like this yeast. This is baker's yeast. See what it looks like? It's basically a dried spores. They look like grains of sand. And this thing is alive. When you put water in it, you actually hydrate it. And then you just need to give it food. So what do you think it eats? I put some water from this dry spores. And I got this. You see this concoction? Look at that. That's basically lots of bubbles, okay? So it's eating, and if you're a baker, you know what I put in it. And if you're not a baker, let me tell you a little bit later. In general, when you give yeast the right foods to eat, it's going to bubble and make gas because it's fermenting, okay? So this is how people bake bread. And if you think about this concept when dealing with Candida fungal infections, then the best thing you can do is to starve the Candida. So here are 10 foods that not only will not feed Candida, but will optimize your immune system. So let's start with number 1. Kale. Kale is really one of the most nutrient-dense foods on this planet. It actually has been shown to increase antibody production in white blood cells. Now, you can cook it or eat it raw, but you have to eat enough of it. And when you eat enough leafy greens like kale, you change your pH, which is important, and I'll get to that a little later. But don't freak out just because I said you have Candida. Candida is a normal part of your microbiome. And if you're a baker, you understand how to promote yeast to grow in, let's say, this petri dish, right? Well, on your body, you have several areas in your body that are distinct petri dishes. Basically, there's more microbes in those areas because they have unique environments. And why do they have unique environments? Because you have different pHs in different parts of your body. So germs in your mouth may not be the same germs underneath your fingertips or your armpits or in your groin. And if you've ever had a skin infection, you know that you had itching, especially in your private parts, jock itch, or you may have itching underneath your armpits or bra line. Most likely, that's probably Candida if it was a fungal yeast infection. Candida lives not only on your skin, but it also lives in your gut. It is really a natural part of your human microbiome. So it's in your mouth, in your entire gastroesophageal tract, all over your skin, and in your private parts. And under normal conditions, Candida really exists as a commensal or harmless microbe on your body. And it's kept in check because you have a competent immune system and you have other microbes that crowd it out to make sure that it stays low. I'm sure you've heard of lactobacillus. It's actually a probiotic. However, when your microbial balance is disrupted, Candida can overgrow and become pathogenic. So I told you the first food that I think is really important, and we will talk about 9 other foods, but unless you understand how to prevent Candida to overgrow, just eating food is only going to go so far. Because if you don't have overgrowth, then you don't have problems of overgrowth. People often overlook 3 root causes that promote Candida to grow. You'll probably be pretty surprised at these top 3 reasons. So number 1 is pH. I'm sure you've heard of pH balance. Well, pH just tells you if something is acidic, like lemon juice, neutral, like water, or alkaline, like baking soda. The scale goes from 0 to 14. Between 0 and 6, something is pretty acidic. It's sour like vinegar. 7 is neutral, so that's close to water, and our blood wants to be close to neutral. And 8 to 14 is alkaline, so something soapy, baking soda solution. Different body parts have different pH. So your armpits is a little bit acidic, 5.5 to 6.5 is the pH, but sweat and bacteria can change your pH. Deodorant can change your pH. In your mouth, your saliva has a pH of 6.2 to 7.6. It's mostly around neutral. However, depending on what you're eating, you can change your pH. So if you eat a lot of sugar, sugar causes bacteria to eat food. It causes it to ferment, to then make acid that then lowers your pH, which then causes cavities. So I put sugar in this yeast to feed it. And you can either make acid from bacteria or fungi, or you can directly suck on acid like a lemon. That'll lower the pH of your saliva and that'll erode your enamel. Now, if you're a female, your pelvic private parts are supposed to have a pH of about 3.8 to 4.5. Douching will change the pH. Now, there's a reason why I just told you about the pH. These are normal, healthy levels. And depending on what you're doing or what you're eating or what grows because of what you're doing and eating, that can change your pH. pH. So if you have an overgrowth of certain bacteria or yeast, that will change the pH. If you use mouthwashes or eat certain foods, take certain medications, take antacids or antibiotics, those will change the pH. And this is a problem when you change your pH so much that you have different microbes. Now in your gut, there's different compartments, so you have different pHs. So your stomach has a pH of 1.5 to 3.5. It's very acidic because its job is to kill microbes in your food and to break down food. Your small intestine has a pH of 6 to 7.5. That's closer to neutral. That helps to absorb food. And your large intestine has a pH of 5.5 to 7, which varies depending on what you eat and what kind of microbes will thrive in your large intestine depending on what you eat. And your urine actually has the largest fluctuation of pH between 4.5 to 8. And this is because the job of your kidney is to balance the pH of your blood. And changes in your diet and hydration, basically changes in your blood pH, will affect your urine pH. So if your diet is full of acids, amino acids from meat, fatty acids from fat, then your pH is going to be more acidic and your kidneys will try to secrete some of that acid. So eating meat lowers the pH of your urine. If your sugar is out of control, like type 1 diabetes, and you can't metabolize the sugar and then your body is making more fatty acid metabolism, you will make more ketones. That will lower the pH of your urine. But on the opposite flip side, if you eat more vegetables and produce, dark leafy greens, that'll actually make your urine more alkaline. It will increase your pH. So what do you think will happen when you eat a lot of sugar and starches, right? It depends on your metabolism. So a normal person, when you eat a lot of sugar like sucrose and starches, your body breaks them down into glucose. And that raises insulin so that you can metabolize glucose. Now, high insulin levels basically makes your kidneys excrete more acid. So if your insulin is persistently high, then you will keep secreting more acid. That lowers urine pH. Now, some gut bacteria ferment sugar and starch into organic acids like lactic acid and acetic acid. So when you're fermenting all that sugar into lactic and acetic acid, that can be absorbed, get into your bloodstream, get filtered by your kidneys, and that makes your urine more acidic. And I had mentioned if you have excess sugar, if you have type 1 diabetes, you can't metabolize the sugar. So if you have excess sugar, then all that sugar goes in your urine and that feeds whatever bacteria or fungi are in there, like Candida. But if you have excess sugar because you have uncontrolled diabetes, whether type 1 or type 2, the same result happens. So this increases your risk of yeast infections as well as bacterial urinary tract infections. Candida just grows better when you have more sugar. And when you have insulin resistance, then when you eat excess sugar, a lot of that will spill in your urine, making your urine smell sweet and be sweet. This is a sign of uncontrolled diabetes and can happen in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. If you notice that there are ants in your bathroom, your urine may be attracting them because of the sugar. So what do you think will help increase your pH to prevent excess Candida growth? Well, I'll address that a little later. Have you had a cold or pneumonia and send a sputum sample and it cultured out yeast? We see this all the time. And a lot of times doctors will tell you it's just colonization. So how do you get colonized with yeast in your respiratory tract? Well, if you didn't know, you have a microbiome in your respiratory tract because it's open to the outside world. And fungi that are actually in your mouth, sometimes you actually get it in your respiratory tract. Now, mold can be spread by spores, but Candida is usually a contact thing. But under normal circumstances, it shouldn't really flourish because of the pH and your immune system. But under the right conditions, when your immune system is low and when your pH is just right, then you can have Candida overgrowth. So in your respiratory tract, you have mucus. The pH of normal healthy mucus is between 6.6 to 7.6. It's almost neutral. That's in a healthy person, not taking any medications. Once you take medications, you potentially can alter the pH in your respiratory tree. Acids like proton pump inhibitors or bicarbonate, they increase the pH of your stomach. This decreases its ability to kill pathogens. And you're constantly swallowing your saliva, right? So when you swallow your saliva, these different kinds of germs in your stomach may not get killed if your stomach acid isn't acidic enough. But it's still going to be more acidic than your respiratory tree. And so that stomach acid may grow germs like Staphylococcus aureus. That may be one way certain bacteria can thrive. But ultimately, your stomach acid is going to be more acidic than your respiratory tree. And a lot of people, they reflux or they aspirate. Whichever end you're doing, if you get stomach contents in your respiratory tree, that will lower the pH of your mucus in your respiratory tree. Hence, it's really important to sit up straight, lean forward. When you drink, don't cock your neck. Don't drink from a straw. And when you make your respiratory tree mucus more acidic, you make it a more favorable environment for Candida to grow. One of the most common reasons why people are on antibiotics is because they have some kind of respiratory infection. But when we give you antibiotics, it doesn't just kill bacteria in your respiratory tree, it actually kills bacteria in your mouth, in your tongue, in your oral cavity, in your urinary tract, everywhere else, right? And when that happens, we're disturbing the microbial balance. We're effectively changing the environment to allow Candida yeast to thrive because antibiotics do not kill yeast. They no longer have competition and they have free range. And so sometimes people on antibiotics will start noticing a white plaque on their tongue and you can't scrape it off. That's a fungal infection. That's called thrush. In addition, when you're sick with a respiratory tract infection like pneumonia or bronchitis, people often don't have good gas exchange and retain more carbon dioxide. And when you have higher carbon dioxide, it's like greenhouse gas warming for the earth, right? The earth traps carbon dioxide, which then goes into our oceans, acidifying our oceans. So if you trap carbon dioxide in your lungs, it's going to go into your mucus and acidify your mucus. And acid makes it more favorable to grow pathogenic bacteria and Candida. This is why if you have obstructive sleep apnea, you need to go get that fixed. Now, I know CPAP machines are uncomfortable, and really in the beginning, any device is uncomfortable, whether it's a CPAP machine or braces. But your pulmonologist can work with you to find the best fitting mask so that you can get used to it. Maybe you need to do it during the daytime so that you can sleep at night. And once you wear it enough, you'll notice you'll feel different. You'll think different. Your fogginess will start going away. There's so many benefits from getting good gas exchange. And it's not just getting more oxygen, it's getting rid of the carbon dioxide. It's like wearing braces. No kid likes to wear braces, and it's uncomfortable until they get used to it. And that's why orthodontists, they mold braces in and they change the rubber bands, every so often, right? You get used to it until that rubber band change. And CPAP is really no different. Candida grows best at a pH around 4 to 7, but really it loves a pH between 5 to 6. And so it loves sugar, like all yeast. They love sugar, right? Lots of bubbles. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, especially if your sugar is not under control, then you are allowing them to ferment more, lower the pH of wherever they're living off of, and that will change the balance of your microbes. And antibiotics just makes all of that worse. Now, number 2 are chemicals that you may be using, including deodorants, lotions, powders, or creams, and for women, douching. These chemicals, they cause trauma under the skin. They can cause a chemical dermatitis as well as a physical dermatitis. And when you're putting them under the armpit, the skin is a little different. It's a little bit more tender, right? Your private area, the skin is more tender. And trauma can be micro trauma, in which there's micro abrasions in the skin. You may not physically see it, but you feel it. And this can allow germs that normally just lay there and colonize and they're just your friends to then become pathogenic and invasive, especially if you don't have a competent immune system.
Hi, friends. I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Now, when you irritate your skin, you're going to activate your immune system, which will then activate a rush of blood and immune cells to the affected area to try to sequester that area. These chemicals that they secrete are reason why you get inflammation, redness, pain, swelling, itching. The swelling is because fluid comes in, and fluid brings in all the nutrients and the white blood cells, but it also makes everything worse. It irritates the tissue. Then sometimes there's so much fluid, it starts leaking outside of the skin. This moisture then causes more yeast to grow. It's like Jell-O. And that's why I stopped using deodorant a really long time ago. But I also stopped when I found out that deodorants, many of them contain aluminum. Now, aluminum salts, they work by blocking sweat glands. That's how it reduces sweating. But did you know you can actually absorb that aluminum in your skin as well as your bloodstream? Aluminum serves literally no purpose in your human body. And once you get it in your system, it's up to your kidneys to get rid of it. If your kidneys don't work, well, your aluminum gets deposited in places like your brain and your breast tissue. And you don't have to have a complete shutoff if you increase the aluminum. And many people actually don't realize that your breast tissue actually extends up your armpit. And that's why when we perform a breast exam for breast cancer screening, we feel the tissue up your armpit and then we feel your armpit for lymph nodes. Now, there's a lot of controversy on whether or not aluminum actually causes dementia or breast cancer, even though it's found in brains of people with dementia and in breast tissue in breast cancer patients. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But all I know is that aluminum causes DNA damage and DNA damage causes cancer and dementia. So, my logic is I'm just going to stop all the aluminum, right? I don't drink from aluminum cans. I don't use aluminum foil. I don't use aluminum cookware. I don't use aluminum deodorant because I just don't want to collect aluminum in my body. And many women, they have this need to douche or put soap in their private areas. These products will change your microbiome and increase your risk of unwanted infectious diseases such as, let's say, urinary tract infections or even sexually transmitted diseases. So it's not a good idea to douche. Now, number 3 happens to both men and women, and that is excessively tight clothes. Just like how chemicals can cause trauma, so can wearing tight clothes that rub against your skin, causing micro abrasions, especially if you're moving. Now, in the summer, lots of people are in bathing suits, and these bathing suits are often pretty tight. So as you move, it's rubbing in your skin, and then you jump into chlorinated water, and then you have a double whammy because the chemical chlorine can irritate the skin too. So microabrasions causing tissue trauma will then allow not only chemicals to go in more calmly, but also pathogens or microbes that are just there, right? They don't become pathogenic until there's a reason for them to become pathogenic. And the areas especially prone are the inguinal ligament area or the groin or underneath the breast tissue where women wear wired bras, or like in the butt, between the butt folds, the butt cheeks, right? That's where sometimes underwear can roll. And then as you walk, there's friction that may rub up and down. This can traumatize the skin in that area. And then you have all these areas trap in more moisture because they're just folded areas of skin. So moisture then breeds more Candida growth, and then inflammation then causes more moisture. It's almost like a diaper rash. If you've ever raised an infant, you know that babies are very susceptible to diaper rash. And diapers do the same thing. They hug to the tissue very tightly. They seal it pretty tight because parents don't want any leaks. And then they pee and poop in their diaper, and it may stay there a long time until the parents notice that they pee and pooped. So when you have a pretty bad diaper rash, what is the best thing to do? Well, give the diaper a break, right? Give the baby a break from the diaper and let your baby go commando. My husband told me to have their bottom see some indirect sunlight. And the sun is especially good because number 1, you're out in the open air to allow the tissue to dry. And if you do indirect sunlight, you actually get infrared light by the sun to then stimulate and activate the immune system. Now, the sun can also kill germs. In fact, phototherapy was used by Dr. Robert Koch in 1882 to treat cutaneous tuberculosis. Dr. Koch actually won a Nobel Prize for that because cutaneous tuberculosis was a very common and disfiguring disease. Now today we have fine-tuned phototherapy and separated it into like red light, blue light, or UV light. It can alter Candida growth. It can affect the ability of Candida to make biofilms while stimulating your immune system to be more active. Your immune system in your skin is very unique. It's actually semi-autonomous and can generate its own antibodies via its own unique T and B cells separate from your systemic immune system and lymph nodes. Hence, it's important to give your skin some sunlight to minimize the trauma, whether it's physical or chemical. If you think about your immune system is like the army that protects your body from invaders from germs, whether they be bacteria, virus, or fungi like Candida. It has special soldiers called immune cells and weapons called antibodies that fight infections in different body parts. And your skin has defender cells called macrophages and dendritic cells. Now, macrophages basically gobble Candida up, whereas dendritic cells are like the scouts. It's like Paul Revere. When they see Candida, they warn the rest of the immune system to come on over and help out. And then the microbes on your skin also help keep Candida in check. Now, this happens on the outside surface as well as on the inside gut lining. And when it comes to your gut, lots of people take probiotics, but unfortunately, it doesn't always work because, when you seed the lawn and you don't fertilize it, then your lawn doesn't grow. So if you take probiotics and you don't feed those microbes, well, then they just go right past through you and get flushed out in the toilet. Your gut's also special. It has immune cells called T helper cells, specifically Th17 cells that send signals to attack Candida. Now, these cells then attract neutrophils that are basically the hitman, and they go and they trap and kill Candida. Another part of your defense are antibodies. Immunoglobulins are antibodies that can stop Candida from binding onto your skin cells. And this can happen in your mucosal surface or in your gut. And this is because we don't want Candida to get into your bloodstream. We don't want any germs in your bloodstream because then it can reach deep tissues like your brain and your heart and your lungs and cause havoc. And when this happens, your body is not happy. Your immune cells will release special chemicals to try to destroy the fungus. You'll have natural killer cells get involved. They will also start killing Candida. And then you'll make more antibodies called immunoglobulin G antibodies, and that will then activate more immune cells to come and find and destroy the fungi. So as you can tell, your immune system plays a very important role in fungal overgrowth. So anything that suppresses your immune cells will leave your defenses vulnerable. And in your mouth, you also have macrophages and dendritic cells. They make IgA antibodies in your saliva to stop Candida from binding and sticking to the surfaces in your mouth and throat. A similar chain of events happens in your private parts. And when these are all healthy and normal, you don't get vaginal yeast infections. Most women suspect they have a vaginal yeast infection when they have itching, or they see thick cottage cheese-like discharge, or they feel burning or redness or swelling. Or they can have painful intercourse. And these are all classic symptoms of inflammation by Candida. Hence, you really need to work on building your immune system to optimize its defense when it comes to any infection, especially Candida. And that is why you should consider eating sulforaphane-rich foods like kale and broccoli. Now, I'm sure your parents told you to eat your broccoli when you were a kid, but I bet you they didn't tell you why. Now, the reason why broccoli is so good is because it interacts with your intraepithelial lymphocytes that live in your gut lining to boost your immune defenses. But I know sometimes broccoli can be very difficult for people to chew. My son throws away all the stems. I find it so wasteful, but he won't stop throwing away the stems. So if your little guy complains about broccoli, then consider broccoli sprouts. They're much easier, softer to chew, and it actually has much more sulforaphanes than the mature broccoli. But I know sprouts can be very expensive, and that's why I actually grow my own sprouts. It's actually pretty easy to do. In a mason jar, put on a mesh lid. Then you put a tablespoon of broccoli seeds and rinse it with vinegar. Then you rinse the vinegar off well and then soak it in a little bit of water overnight, about 24 hours. I always use sterilized water, and I sterilize it by boiling it and letting it cool. The next day, I then rinse it again with sterilized water, and then I spread the seeds around the mason jar on the sides. And then I check on it twice a day to rinse the water, to change out the water and to make sure it stays well hydrated. And when you see the leaves start peeking out, I put it in indirect sunlight so I can make those sprouts get chlorophyll. It usually takes about 4 days to get edible sprouts. And before I eat them, I'll always rinse them one more time. They are great in salads and in your favorite sandwich. Really, they're a complement to just about everything. So number 4 is another cruciferous vegetable, that is cauliflower. And it is a very unique vegetable because it turns pretty soft when you cook it. So soft that it almost replaces the texture of rice. Now, the best thing about cauliflower is that it's still a cruciferous vegetable, so it has sulforaphanes. So if you chop it up finely, I would say roughly 30 to 40 minutes before you cook it, you can maximize the sulforaphane content. So you can always do a transition in which you cook some rice and then you mix it together. It looks just like white rice, but of course if you use non-white rice, then your family can tell. Now I know a lot of people want to wean off of white rice. And the reason why a lot of people want to get rid of excess starches is because it turns into sugar that can feed Candida. And a great transition is to put cauliflower because it can help you alkalize your pH, further reducing your sugars, but also increasing your pH in your urine. it may be a great transition to get you off rice. And cauliflower can also be used as flour in breads. That's why people make cauliflower pizza dough. And the trick to making cauliflower pizza dough is to use cooked cauliflower. Now it's easy just to blend the cauliflower into fine particles, cook it, and then squeeze out all the water. But you need a binder. So a lot of people put eggs as a binder, but I actually use flaxseed as a binder because I want extra fiber and I want good omega-3 fats. And to use flax seeds, you can use flaxseed meal or grind up flaxseed, add some water in it, and then you add your desired cauliflower. You do need water, so if you squeeze out the cauliflower water, then I would put the flax seeds in that, and if it's not enough water to make it kind of like a gelatinous liquid material, then you can add just basically more water. And to that dough, you can season it with oregano, pepper, onion powder, miso paste for salt, nutritional yeast for that extra cheesy flavor, and then you make it into a ball, you flatten it, or you pour it out. If you can't shape it, it's okay. It could take the shape of the pan. Bake it at 350 for 30 minutes or until it's dry. Now, number 5 is bok choy. That is actually my kid's favorite vegetable. It's softer, it's sweeter, and it tastes more moist, unlike kale. It still has sulforaphane. It's a great soup vegetable. And it's another great way to elevate your urine pH. And sulforaphanes also help your immune system by supporting the glutathione redox system. And when you support your immune system, you protect yourself from pathogens and pollutants. Lots of times you forget we're surrounded by air pollution and we don't notice it until we see the smog as we're driving on the freeway. Or when you're inhaling the car exhaust, right, as you're walking next to the road. Air pollution suppresses your immune system. And phytonutrients found in these cruciferous vegetables, such as sulforaphanes, can help boost your natural defenses to protect against pollution. I try to make bok choy every week, at least once a week. I rotate my cruciferous vegetables. My sister-in-law actually came over yesterday and dropped off one of my kids' favorite soups. Pho soup, homemade pho soup. And she cooked a bunch of bok choy to have with it. Now, traditionally, the soup is also served with cilantro and onions, both of which have been shown to help people with mitigating pollution. Now, red onions may be more beneficial than just the traditional white onions, as it's been shown to reduce dioxin toxicity in half. But you have to eat it throughout the day, simply because the effect doesn't last very long. Now, if you've not heard of dioxins, then you really need to listen to this. Dioxins are basically a group of highly toxic, long-lasting chemicals that come from industrial waste or burning materials. Now, people don't intentionally make dioxins, but they are a byproduct of what we enjoy, right? You got to do something with your trash. So some people burn their waste, they burn plastics, incinerators, or we like white paper, right? Chlorine-based paper bleaching, or we're spraying pesticides and chemical pollutants, burning fossil fuels and wood. They all make dioxins. So basically, there's not one single person not exposed to dioxins. And these chemicals, they stay in the environment for decades. They build up in animals, they accumulate in human fat tissue, and we just collect them over time. So the goal should be lowering dioxin collection. Dioxins are fat soluble. So that means when you eat animal fats, you're going to get more dioxins. And the higher up the animal, the more food that they eat, the more dioxins they have in their fat. The main sources of exposures for humans include meat, dairy, and fish, especially fatty cuts and farmed fish. Now, eggs can have dioxins, and of course, breathing polluted air near industrial sites or wildfires, drinking contaminated water, or coming into contact with contaminated soil. So if you live near the fires of the Palisades in Altadena or directly at the epicenter, well, you probably inhaled some dioxins from all that burning smoke, and the dioxins may be in your garden. You may want to get your soil tested. Even tiny amounts of dioxins can cause very serious health problems. In general, they disrupt hormones, they damage DNA, they weaken the immune system, and they last a long time. So if they're around and you keep getting exposed, well, long-term exposure can cause cancer, especially to your liver, your lung, and your immune system. It is known to cause hormone disruption in your thyroid, fertility, maybe birth defects. It weakens the immune system, causing higher infection risks as well as autoimmune issues. And I mentioned the liver. It can damage the liver and can cause severe skin conditions like chloracne or a rash-like cysts that look like pimples. And newborns can have developmental issues. Now, as a kid, my parents always taught me to trim the fat. Don't eat the fat off of meat. Or cook the meat in a way to let all the fat drip off, like Peking duck, right? However, I've learned that there are just so many other toxins, even if you did that with meat. And so minimizing your exposure, even to lean meats, is really the best way to go. But if you want to eat meat, then choose an organic, grass-fed meat and dairy. But it's important to avoid being around anything burning, whether that's plastic or wood in your house. So unless you have no other alternative, don't light your fireplace. My mom used to light the fireplace around Christmas because it was pretty, but it was such an inefficient way to get energy. And then you're creating a bunch of dioxins that literally float in the air. They're landing in your yard, water reservoirs, and some of it is also in your house. And hence, it's important that we pay attention to toxins, we filter our drinking water, and we boost our natural defenses. And one of the most important boosters are berries. Berries not only have anti-cancer protective properties, but they repair damage caused by pollutants, and they lower inflammation, and they can boost natural killer cell activity. Unlike antibody-mediated defenses, your natural killer cells, they don't depend upon antibodies to defend you. And when you have antibodies, that means your body is prepared because it had previous exposure. Most antibodies are, in effect, your immune memory. So what happens when you have never seen the germ before? Well, if your natural killer cells aren't around, then they will be welcomed in. And that's why it's important to boost your natural killer cells with blueberries. I try to eat them every day. And if you want an even more flavorful and more powerful berry, then try black raspberries. Gastrointestinal cancers are on the rise in young people. And there's a lot of speculation of why this is. And obviously, there's something in our food. It could be the amount of pollutants. We have so many more than our grandparents. And these are indirect pollutants as well as the direct chemicals that are put in our food. It's so hard to tell. So that's why I try to encourage my young adult children to eat black raspberries every day. And I've been really bummed because I can't find any fresh black raspberries. But then I realized all the clinical studies I was reading were done with black raspberry powder. Now, number 10 is a spice that I didn't realize is related to ginger, and that is cardamom. So just sprinkling some cardamom on your food can boost natural killer cell activity. Cardamom is a sweet aromatic spice, and it's harvested from the seeds of ginger plants. They have a unique flavor that are found in Indian cuisine, especially curries. Now, I love shopping in ethnic stores, and I'm really fortunate that I live in Southern California where I can go to an Indian store, and down a corner of that is a Chinese store or a Japanese store, Korean store, or Mexican store. And I can do this all in the same afternoon. And the other day, I went to a Korean store and I found a giant bucket of mushrooms, oyster mushrooms. I mean, literally, it was like this big. And guess how much it was? It was like $12. It was amazing. It was the biggest buy of mushrooms I've ever bought, and at such a bargain price. Usually I'm buying a little bit of mushrooms like this bowl, and it's like $6. And normally I wouldn't buy such a big bucket of food that I couldn't use rapidly, but my sister-in-law was coming, so I knew that I could share it with her. And when I took it apart, it literally filled 3-gallon bags. I try to eat mushrooms at least weekly, if not daily, because mushroom eaters actually have 50% more salivary IgA antibodies than those who don't eat mushrooms. But sometimes the immune system is so suppressed that food alone really won't help it much. You know, it's like if a person has HIV or AIDS, they're vulnerable to so many more infections than just Candida. But if you have the telltale signs of having a compromised immune system, then you are more susceptible to fungal infections, and you have fungal toenail infections. So if you do see multiple toenails infected with fungus, then you should go see your personal physician to get an HIV test. Now remember, this isn't medical advice, so don't panic. Always consult your own personal physician. Don't change anything just because you hear it from me or on social media. It's just a good rule to follow. Not everybody with fungal toenail infections has HIV. But if you have fungal toenail infections, then you do have a problem with your immune system. Oftentimes, if your immune system is really low, then you will have multiple sites with fungal infections. You may have fungal toenails, and you also can have thrush, or the white coat on your tongue. You can also have fungal infections in your armpits, in your folds. This is just an indication that your immune system is struggling. There are many conditions that can suppress a person's immune system. Cancer, high blood sugars like diabetes, or if you're taking medications like steroids or prednisone. Hence, it's important to seek counsel from your own personal physician to address these conditions. Now, if you have cancer and then you get chemotherapy, well, that can further suppress your immune system. Or if you have an infection and then you take antibiotics, well, that's a double whammy to suppress your immune system too. All of these conditions can cause Candida overgrowth. There's actually over 100 different species of Candida, and the reason why it's important to know this is because they can be treated differently. Candida albicans is the most common cause of infections. This species is highly adaptable, it forms biofilms, and it switches between the yeast and hyphal forms. Candida albicans is usually pretty easy to treat with our current antifungals. Candida glabrata is more resistant to antifungal drugs. Candida parapsilosis are a common cause of hospital-acquired Candida infections. They thrive on devices like catheters and prosthetics. Candida tropicalis is also aggressive immunocompromised patients. They are frequently seen in bloodstream infections. Now, Candida cruzi, they are naturally resistant to fluconazole and commonly cause invasive infections. Now, you may have been screened for Candida aureus. This is a highly drug-resistant yeast that has emerged as a global health threat because of its ability to cause severe infections, and it's resistant to multiple antifungal drugs. It also apparently spreads quite easily in healthcare settings. Now, this was first identified in 2009 from a patient's ear infection in Japan, but retrospective studies show that it may have been around before then. And bloodstream infections from Candida aureus, basically candidemia, has a mortality rate of 30 to 60%. Now, unlike typical Candida infections, which are often caused by the patient's own microbiome, Candida aureus is primarily spread through contaminated surfaces and person-to-person contact. But of course, you have to have risk factors for that. So being hospitalized, staying in the ICU, having medical devices like catheters or breathing tubes, being immunosuppressed, being on antibiotics, or taking chemotherapy, or being an organ transplant patient, having uncontrolled diabetes or chronic illness, or long-term antifungal use that basically disrupts your microbiome, it can cause Candida to grow. And once it grows, it's really difficult to eradicate because it makes biofilms on people and hospital equipment. The symptoms of Candida aureus infections is really dependent upon the severity of the infection, but it's really dangerous when it enters the bloodstream. That's called candidemia. And symptoms often depend on the site of infection. So if you have a bloodstream infection that can enter from a peripheral or a central catheter or like a skin tear, that can cause severe fever and chills that don't improve with antibiotics. And sepsis-like symptoms can happen like low blood pressure and organ dysfunction. These people have a high mortality rate of about 30 to 60%. A lot of times people are dealing with chronic bed sores or wounds that are slow to heal, redness, swelling, or pus. This can commonly occur in people who are bedbound, elderly people, people with diabetes, chronically ill, maybe post-surgical patients or burn victims. That can also predispose to Candida growth in the wound. Now, I mentioned the person that was isolated from had an ear infection. So if you have chronic ear infections or just acute ear infection, that can be caused by a fungi, otomycosis. You can have persistent ear pain, discharge, hearing loss. But the most common recurring infection that we see are urinary tract infections. People can complain of burning with urination, frequent urination, or cloudy urine. However, in many cases, Candida aureus just colonizes people without having any symptoms. And this is why it's difficult to control in healthcare settings. So if you are worried, see your own personal medical doctor. Most of the time when physicians are dealing with Candida infections, we start with fluconazole, which is in the azole class of antifungals. But for Candida aureus, 90% are resistant to fluconazole. And in the past, people would give amphotericin, which is Pauline class of antifungals. In medical school, everybody learns. The nickname from amphotericin is amphoterrible because it causes terrible side effects. People just have a terrible time tolerating amphotericin. Not everybody, but some people. It's also extremely toxic to the kidneys. So it makes the kidneys leak potassium and magnesium. So your doctor has to often give you replacement potassium magnesium alongside with amphotericin to make sure that you don't get depleted. The first-line therapy for resistant antifungals is to give people an echinocandin, such as capsulfungin, micafungin. These drugs work differently. They're intravenous only, and they are used to treat fluconazole-resistant Candida species. And the best part of any Candida is that they are much better tolerated. However, there are instances in which Candida can be resistant, and at that point, then we have to use amphotericin. Now notice that I just mentioned 3 classes of drugs, 3 choices, which means that the treatment for Candida infection is very limited. The goal is to prevent the infections, because every time you use an antifungal or anybody else in the world uses an antifungal, we are just breeding more drug-resistant Candida infections. Hence, it's super important to focus on ways to prevent trauma, whether chemical or physical, and to optimize your immune system through foods like mushrooms. And if you want to learn more about that, watch the next video.